Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Viper Strike 95, and we're here in beautiful Seattle, Washington here today on this morning stream. We're here at Seattle's Boeing Field here. If you guys are aware about Boeing Field, of course, this airport was once Seattle's main airport. It's now a cargo airport nowadays. It's also home to the Museum of Flight. But we're here today to cover the biggest game in American sports right now, and that is Super Bowl 59, actually. LIX means Super Bowl 59, so we're here to cover the upcoming matchup for tonight. The Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. Now, if you guys don't know, this is not the first time the Patriots and Seahawks have met in the Super Bowl. So, very big matchup between two very unexpected teams this season. I mean, most people were not expecting to see the Patriots and Seahawks in the Super Bowl this year, so should be a really good one. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat and all the lurkers. Good morning to all of you guys. So, kind of bit of the flight plan for today. So we're going to fly out of Boeing Field. We're going to fly out of 1414 right. From there, we'll make our way down over to Elma and Jam. Make our way south over through Oregon into Northern California, and we'll make our way down using the Bricks arrival into San Jose Airport. And we'll make our way down to San Jose, over downtown San Jose. Then we'll have a brief flyover into Levi Stadium as well, so we can cover the Super Bowl. But very big game today, so we're going to be flying out of Boeing Field. The flight should be about 1 hour and 52 minutes, so we got plenty of time here today. So, of course, we got our beautiful Firefly Air Livery 737, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and get this plane, everything set up here. I've been flying this plane quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. So I should get this started pretty quickly, so this shouldn't take me very long. It should take me pretty quickly. So we got the notes ready for when we're going to be doing this, so we should be getting ready for the Super Bowl, obviously. So let's go ahead and get this started. Payload, I'm going to go ahead and set the FMS payload stuff. I'm going to go ahead and set this up. It is going to be 130 passengers, 114. I'm going to keep the fuel the way it is. Initialize the position. Kilo Bravo Foxtrot India. 14 right. Kilo Sierra I'm gonna move. Sorry if I'm not paying attention to the chat for a bit. I'm just trying to get everything. Boom. Just gonna take care of this. Initialization. Flight level 370. 258.76. By how much length? 10,000 feet. Approach. No need for the radial coordinates. So we're going to go ahead and get the altitude set up. 50. Turn on the flight directors. Remove chocks. So we're going to do that. Get the engines turned on. Should be pretty quick to get the engines up and going. Like I said, doing this pretty quickly. So yeah, big game today for the Super Bowl, obviously. Get ready for the big game. So Bowen Field, for those who don't know about the airport we'll take off here today, this is King County International Airport. It's called Bowen Field. This was once the main airport back in Seattle until the 1940s when Seattle Tacoma was built. But this is a major airport for Kenmore Air mainly flies out of it now, but it's mainly used for cargo. Mainly Ameriflight and UPS use this airport for their cargo operations. But of course, if you really want to go visit the airport, you can check out the Museum of Flight, which is in the southwest corner of the airfield. Is the Museum of Flight, which is one of the best aviation museums in the world. It's an amazing privately owned museum. Lots of aviation goodies in that museum. I've been there. Really, really nice. Heat, wing anti-ice. Packs that way. This. Go ahead and turn them off. So we're going to go ahead and make our way down to the end of the runway. 37,000 feet is, I'm going to set the speedometer. And I'm going to set this over to 135-degree heading. So we're about to make our way. I'm also going to set the trim. So we'll be taxiing down this way. So yeah, this is Bowen Field. I picked it because it was also the closest to the sports stadiums here in Seattle. I know technically Seattle Tacoma would make the most sense for a flight like this, but I wanted to pick Boeing Field since it doesn't usually get. So we're gonna set up here, park. We're gonna turn off the taxi lights, and we're going to go ahead and get rolling. So this flight time will be 1 hour and 52 minutes in the air time. So it should take us about an hour and 52 minutes. So we would get there by 12 o'clock. Here we go. We're up, 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 and away we go. So here's downtown Seattle in the distance. So we'll be saying goodbye to downtown. As we say goodbye downtown Seattle, we're going to make our way over to San Jose. And the reason we're going to San Jose is because, well, San Jose is the closest airport to the Super Bowl. So we're going to go ahead and turn left. We're going to turn right. Now, dead ahead of us is the main Seattle airport, Seattle Tacoma, an airport I've been through a few times, Seattle Tacoma International. Now, this is an airport I've been through many times during my times in Seattle. So, we'll be making our way up to around we're climbing through this pretty nicely. So, we'll climb up to around 10,000 feet. So we'll talk more about the Super Bowl and a bit more about its history when we get past 10,000 feet. So we're about to make our way over, so we'll turn off the landing lights here as we make our way into our next stop. This will make our way up to our next waypoint. So, so the big thing going on today, of course, is when we're going to be flying up here. So we'll get to 37,000 feet soon. So, by the way, guys, for those who don't know, there's been some pretty big stuff in sports going on yesterday. Everton won yesterday. They did. It wasn't a pretty game, but they got 2 goals in the second half, and they got the 3 points against Fulham. The Toffees are going to move up the table to now 8th place in the table. So the Toffees are 8th, which is amazing news. 2 points behind Liverpool. So really great result this week. Got some nice results. So happy about that. And then, of course, in other sports news, Louisville basketball's doing all right. The Cardinals got another win yesterday against Wake Forest. The Cards are now on a 3-game win streak for Louisville. Not doing too bad for the Cardinals. It's nice to have some good Louisville basketball for once. So, doing pretty decently, of course. But the big one, of course, is the Super Bowl this Sunday. So, we'll be... Oh, man, that's a beautiful snapshot right there. Yeah, the livery is done by Gibbo Ireland, the 737 livery. Looks absolutely amazing. The Alpha livery. Isn't she a stunner? So. So we're now above 18,000. Let's go ahead and talk about our topic here for today. And our topic today is the Super Bowl, and that's the annual league championship game of the NFL, of course. This big matchup, of course, is the biggest event in American sports. It's been served as the final game of every NFL season since 1966, which replaced the old NFL championship game. Since 2022, the game's been played on the second Sunday in February, which, of course, today is the day this season. Prior Super Bowls were played on Sundays from early to mid-January, from 1967 to 78, late January from 1979 to 2003, and the first Sunday of February from 2004 to 2021. Of course, the people who won the Super Bowl has been awarded a trophy known as the Vince Lombardi Trophy after the coach who won the first 2 Super Bowls. But the game itself was created as part of a merger agreement in 1966 between the NFL and the competing American Football League to have their best teams compete for a championship. And that lasted until 1969 as the AFL-NFL championship game. And then once the 2 leagues merged, they formed 2 different conferences. And since 1971, the Super Bowl has been played between the 2 best teams of each conference. The Super Bowl is among the world's most watched single sport events and commands the largest audience among all American broadcasts during the year. And it's second only to the UEFA Champions League final as the most watched club sport event worldwide. in the and in fact, the 7 most watched American broadcasts in American TV history are all Super Bowls. Yes, so this is a lot of popularity, of course. Commercial airtime is also the most expensive due to high viewership, and its halftime shows feature some of the top artists. And it's one of the highest honors in music. And Super Bowl is also the second largest event for American food consumption, too. So, yeah, Super Bowl, this game is absolutely huge. Now, of course, this year's Super Bowl matchup, Super Bowl 59, is between the Seahawks and the Patriots. Oh, and I forgot to change the title. It's Super Bowl LX. Oops. There we go. I changed the stream title. I got the wrong Super Bowl number. It's Super Bowl 60, actually. Super Bowl 60, actually, is here. Not 59, 60. Last year was 59. So, I got the wrong number. But this year's Super Bowl is between the Seahawks and Patriots, and they both had absolutely crazy seasons for both teams. Here's the crazy thing is, not many people predicted these two teams to even make the Super Bowl this year. Was one of the most unlikely Super Bowls. This was the first Super Bowl since 1977 featuring two teams that had 61 or higher odds to win in the preseason. And the crazy thing was, for the preseason predictions, many people predicted it would be the Eagles and the Chiefs who would be the two most likely teams in the Super Bowl during the preseason, along with the Ravens and the Bills. But the crazy thing was, it did not turn out that way. In the AFC side of things, it was the Patriots who were their odds of making the Super Bowl were plus 8,000. They weren't even which made it one of the more unlikely teams to make the run the Super Bowl this year. And they went 14-3, absolutely dominating the AFC, which was a bit of a weird influx that year. Which was a bit of a weird influx this year because the Bills, while they did do well, the Bills were only 12-5. The craziest story, however, is the Chiefs, who, mind you, the last few years have made the Super Bowl under Patrick Mahomes. Instead, they didn't even make the playoffs. They only went 6-11 that year. Mahomes was out with an injury, of course, to end his season, sadly. He suffered a really bad torn ACL injury. So no Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and even then, the Chiefs were just really inconsistent this year. So we had a really surprising year. I mean, that was a season where neither Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson even made the playoffs. Instead, the Patriots did have some pretty tough challenges, but they knocked out the Chargers in the wild card. Then they beat a pretty impressive Houston Texans team, 28-16, and finally the championship. It was an absolute mess, but the Patriots got done beating the Denver Broncos to get there. Now, the craziest thing about the NFC side of things was even crazier than the NFC side of things. The Seahawks won the division under Sam Darnold, who had an unbelievable season. Sam Darnold had an unbelievable year in Seattle, and really made the Seahawks really regret not keeping him because Sam Darnold was extremely impressive. 14-3 record, the best record in the NFC. Now, the entire NFC West division was pretty stacked with the Rams and 49ers all being really great. But the Seahawks were just better. And for Seattle's journey to the Super Bowl, they ended up getting the number one seed in the West, so they got to skip the wild card round. absolutely demolished the 49ers 41-6. And then the NFC Championship game, they had an absolute classic against the LA Rams, 31-27. So, yeah, we have the Seahawks and the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Now, the craziest thing about this is not the first time the Patriots and Seahawks have actually met in the Super Bowl. You see, they met in one previous matchup between the two teams, and the last time these two teams have actually played against each other was back in Super Bowl 49. Is 49, and this was an absolute classic Super Bowl. Super Bowl 49 was an absolute classic between the New England Patriots that was coached by Bill Belichick and quarterback by Tom Brady, taking on Seattle's legendary Legion of Boom defense, and it was an absolute classic to the very end. And the game was ultimately decided in the goal line at the 1-yard line. The Seahawks could have ran the football to Marshawn Lynch, but instead they chose to pass it, and it was intercepted by Patriots quarterback Malcolm Butler, ending what would be one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time, and it ended up being one of the worst calls of all time. And that game ended up giving the Patriots another ring for Tom Brady. It would be Brady's 5th championship. And Brady got to win one of his major Super Bowls. He got to win his 4th Super Bowl during that time. So, big thing about Tom Brady, of course. But it was an absolute classic matchup. So we get to see these two teams finally meet each other again. So that's why the Super Bowl is going to be a very big deal this year. Absolute crazy stuff. So here's a bit more of the slideshow, just for you guys here. So the origins of our Super Bowl and the origins of this game. Now, since the turn of the 20th century, college football teams across the U.S. have scheduled bowl games against each other, which basically is a number of postseason games. The original bowl game, of course, was the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, that was played back in 1902. But eventually, this game gained to be even more popular, and bowl games are now a major part of the American college football landscape. Now, 4 decades after its 1920 inception, the NFL has successfully fended off several rival leagues. However, in 1960, it encountered its most serious competitor, the American Football League. And the AFL was formed in 1960 by Lamar Hunt. And the AFL vied for the NFL with players and fans. After the AFL inaugural season, the commissioner at the time, Joe Foss, sent an invitation to the NFL to schedule a playoff game between the two league champions. However, that didn't end up being the case until a couple more years later in the 1960s, when Lamar Hunt, the owner of the AFL Kansas City Chiefs, used the term for the Super Bowl during their AFL-NFL Championship merger meetings. And eventually in 1966, when the NFL and the AFL merged, they chose the game, the AFL-NFL Championship game. But ultimately, the media used the term Super Bowl then. And of course, one major thing about the Super Bowl, of course, is that Roman numerals are used to identify each Super Bowl. So making it one of the few things that still use Roman numerals. So, pretty big stuff going on, but that is the origin of our Super Bowl. Now, talk about the history, of course. Let's talk about the history of it for a bit. Just a brief history of each of the games, of course. In terms of the Super Bowl, the first 2 championship games, the first 2 Super Bowls were won by the Green Bay Packers, and they defeated the Chiefs and Raiders following the 1966 and 67 seasons, respectively. And of course, the Packers, we've actually covered them in the series. Well, they were led at the time by quarterback Bart Starr. who won the MVP for both games. And of course, you all know they were coached by the legendary Vince Lombardi, and he helped them become the juggernaut of the 1960s for the Packers. And they've won multiple NFL championships in the 60s, which made them extremely impressive as well, making them the premier team in the 60s. Now, interestingly, in 1968, one of the greatest upsets in Super Bowl history occurred on Super Bowl III, when the New York Jets defeated the 19.5 favorite Baltimore Colts 16-7. And interestingly enough, they were led by quarterback Joe Namath, who back in the old days was a major figure in the NFL. He's now in the Hall of Fame, of course, but he had a very prolific career, not just as a player, but also as an actor, too. But he was an icon for New York football in the New York City area. And most famously, during that Super Bowl, he had a guaranteed that the Jets win before the game. And he ended up actually proving it right. Of course, and this was reinforced the next year with the competitiveness with the AFL and NFL, because the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in Super Bowl IV, defeating the NFL's Vikings 23-7. Now, of course, after the AFL-NFL merger was fully complete in 1970, three NFL franchises were going to dominate the 70s. The Dallas Cowboys, Miami Dolphins, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to win 8 Super Bowls between them in the decade. 4 of those belonged to the Steelers, 2 by the Dolphins, and 2 from the Cowboys. But the first part of the decade actually started with the Colts winning the Super Bowl by defeating the Cowboys in Super Bowl V. Interestingly enough, in Super Bowl V, of course, this was the only Super Bowl still to this day which the Super Bowl MVP belonged to a player from the losing team, Chuck Halley. So, very important figure with that, of course. However, the next year, the Dallas Cowboys returned back with a vengeance and beat the Dolphins in Super Bowl VI. But most famously, of course, for the Dolphins, they would go on to win the Super Bowl the very next year, and not just win the Super Bowl, they completed a perfect season in 1972, winning the Super Bowl 14-7 against the Washington Redskins, aka now the Commanders, to cap off a perfect 14-0 season, and they're still the first and only team in the Super Bowl era to finish a perfect season, which became one of the most legendary teams of all time, and the Dolphins then win the next year, of course, beating the Vikings. However, in the mid to late 70s, there's one particular franchise that would end up dominating. That would be the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we actually covered the Steelers a bit during our... I have an achievement we did. We talked about the 78 Steelers, but the Steelers became the first NFL dynasty in the post-merger era by winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. Those being Super Bowl 9, 10, 13, and 14 within the next 6 years. And of course, they were led by the legendary Chuck Noll. And of course, they had stars on offense, Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, John Stallworth. But what truly set the Steelers apart was their legendary defense, and it known as the Steel Curtain, led by defensive tackle Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Mel Blount, but most notably their 2 infamous linebackers, Jack Ham and Jack Lambert. Absolute studs. And the Steelers completely dominated much of the 70s. And the only things that interrupted their dynasty, of course, were the Raiders' first Super Bowl win in Super Bowl 11, and the Cowboys' second win in the 70s, winning Super Bowl 12. So basically, the Steelers were the absolute juggernaut. But of course, the 80s and 90s would come, and it turned the tables for the AFC, as the NFC dominated the Super Bowls for the new decade, and most of them at the 90s. And during those 2 decades, the NFC won 16 of those 20 Super Bowls, including 13 straight. from Super Bowl 19 to Super Bowl 31. Of course, you all probably know the 1980s were the most successful team in that decade was the San Francisco 49ers, which featured the legendary West Coast offense that was pioneered by head coach Bill Walsh. And that offense was led by Joe Montana out of Notre Dame. Joe Montana, absolutely amazing quarterback. Of course, then the greatest wide receiver of all time, Jerry Rice. And running back Roger Craig, who's finally in the Hall of Fame after so many years, and led them to win 4 Super Bowls in the 1980s, and made 9 playoff appearances between 1981 and 1990. And 2 particular of those came during the 80s. The 84 49ers completed an 18-1 record and absolutely demolished the Miami Dolphins. And then, of course, the 89 season, they beat the most lopsided Super Bowl win ever against the Broncos, 55 to 10. The other teams in the 1980s that did really well was, of course, the Chicago Bears, won the Super Bowl in 85, producing one of the greatest defenses of all time, and absolutely annihilated the Patriots 45-6. Then you also have the Washington Redskins, aka the Commanders, and the New York Giants have also won Super Bowls during the 80s and 90s. The Skins won 3 Super Bowls in the 1980s as well, and the Giants won 2 Super Bowls during the 80s and 90s. However, one very interesting thing happened, of course, was that after several seasons of poor records, the Cowboys rose to their peak in the 90s. And of course, they had some amazing talent during those years. Troy Aikman, running back Emmitt Smith, and wide receiver Michael Irvin forming a 3-headed monster on offense that won 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls. In Super Bowl 27, 28, and Super Bowl 30. Lots of great things, of course, for the Dallas Cowboys, the peak of the 90s. However, one very interesting event, of course, was in Super Bowl 32. John Elway finally won a Super Bowl by beating the Packers, who were the defending champs at the time, breaking the NFC's winning streak. And then John Elway won his next Super Bowl the very next year, defeating the Falcons in his final NFL game, of course. However, the team that would truly dominate, of course, this would end up changing the fortunes of the AFC, and they've now become the dominant force from 1995 to 2018. 5 teams accounted for the AFC's newfound dominance: the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New England Patriots, the Denver Broncos, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Indianapolis Colts. And the team that would end up being the complete dominant force in the NFL during the 2000s, of course, was none other than the New England Patriots, who became the early force of the early 2000s. And they would actually dominate it. And guess who led the Patriots to all those Super Bowls in the early 2000s? Tom Brady did, including one very famous upset in Super Bowl 36, where he knocked out the greatest show on turf, St. Louis Rams. And they would go on to win 2 more Super Bowls in the early 2000s, building the Patriots dynasty. Then afterwards, the Colts and Steelers ended up continuing their dominance as the Steelers won Super Bowl 40 and the Colts won Super Bowl 41, giving Peyton Manning his first ring. One crazy thing was the 2007 season. The Patriots became the 4th team in NFL history to finish a perfect unbeaten regular season. However, unfortunately for Patriots fans, you guys all know what happened in Super Bowl 42. You guys lost to Eli Manning and the Giants, 17-14 in one of the absolute classics. Now, during the 2010s, in that year, saw strong performances from several position quarterbacks, particularly Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and Peyton Manning has appeared in a lot of the Super Bowls. But one very interesting Super Bowl, of course, there were multiple great ones, but in Super Bowl 46, at 51 actually, was the first Super Bowl to end in overtime. And And it turned out the Falcons choked a 28-3 lead. And the Patriots went on to win in overtime 34-28. And the Patriots overcame a 25-point deficit, the largest comeback for any team in the Super Bowl. So yeah, Falcons fans will never forget 28-3. So yeah, basically don't choke 28-3. Of course, one major thing happened. Of course, was in Super Bowl 54, of course, was the first time the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 50 years, defeating the 49ers 31-20. And it marked the first time since 1991 the NFC did not have more Super Bowls than the AFC. And the Chiefs ended up appearing in multiple Super Bowls throughout the 2020s, including most recently, of course, the most recent Chiefs Super Bowl appearance most recent championship for the Chiefs was in 2024, Super Bowl 58, which they ended up knocking out the San Francisco 49ers in overtime, secured back-to-back championships for the first time since 2004. The most recent Super Bowl that was played was, of course, the Chiefs looking to win back-to-back Super Bowls. Of course, the team that stood in their way was the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59. But unfortunately for the Chiefs, it was not even close. The Eagles absolutely destroyed the Chiefs 40-22, and in fact, it wasn't even close. At one point, it was 34-0. And the Eagles won their second Super Bowl. So that concludes a bit of a history of the Super Bowl, of course, during the game's history. So that concludes a bit of the history of the games here at the Super Bowl. So we're at 37,000 feet. We're now at cruise altitude at 37,000 feet, as you guys can probably tell. So we're finally climbing our way up. We have about 475 nautical miles away from our final stop at San Jose International Airport. So we're doing quite well here today. So I hope you're all doing well here, of course. For my predictions for Super Bowl, I have the Seahawks winning the championship. I just think they're the bit of the better team. They've just been more impressive this season than the Patriots have been. Now, I'm not saying the Patriots could not win the Super Bowl. I think so there has been a couple predictions, of course. Multiple predictions, of course, from multiple news sources. But many people are picking the Seahawks, though there's plenty of people picking the Patriots, so it could go either way. But yeah, 23. You know, do that very well. So, getting ready for the big game, of course. So interestingly about this Super Bowl, of course, and the Super Bowl 50, this year's halftime show will be done by Bad Bunny. He'll be doing the halftime show. But next year's Super Bowl will take place at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, of course. So we'll be doing plenty of that. So we'll be making our way forward even more so. So we'll continue on with our next slide, the ceremonies and entertainment for the Super Bowl, of course. Early Super Bowls featured a halftime show consisted of marching bands from local colleges or high school. However, as the popularity of the game increased, a trend emerged where popular singers and musicians performed during its pregame ceremonies and halftime show, or simply sang the national anthem of the United States, America the Beautiful, or lift every voice and sing. The U.S. national anthem has been performed by all but one Super Bowl, and as a result, the U.S. national anthem is sung. Ever since 2021, Lift Every Voice and Sing has also been sung prior to America the Beautiful in honor of Black History Month. Of course, for many years, the best performance of the national anthem was Whitney Houston's performance of the national anthem during Super Bowl 25 was one of the best renditions of the national anthem in history. Of course, one interesting thing is that unlike regular season or playoff games, 30 minutes are allocated for the Super Bowl halftime. And there has been some very interesting halftime performances of halftime shows. Michael Jackson got to perform in a halftime show. Michael Jackson once performed here. U2 performed the Super Bowl halftime show in 2002, Super Bowl 36. But one of the most controversial ones was Super Bowl 38. And this was the most controversial halftime show because of an infamous wardrobe malfunction that occurred with Janet Jackson's top. And it was one of the most controversial Super Bowl halftime shows ever again. The official public address announcer for the Super Bowl has been Minnesota Vikings announcer Alan Roach. So he's now the public voice actor, and he's appeared in every Super Bowl since Super Bowl 40 in 2006, with the exceptions of of 3 Super Bowls when the Denver Broncos played those games. So pretty important stuff. Of course, after that, of course, we'll be getting to the venues. As of Super Bowl 59, of course, 30 of the 59 Super Bowls have been played in 3 metro areas: the greater Miami area, New Orleans, and Los Angeles. No market or region without an NFL franchise has ever hosted a Super Bowl. And the presence of an NFL team in a market is now a de jure requirement by law, forbidding the game. And the venue that hosted the most Super Bowls was in New Orleans, the Superdome. Of course, the location of the Super Bowl is chosen at a meeting of all NFL team owners, usually 3 to 5 years before the event. And the game has never played in a metropolitan area that lacked an NFL franchise during a game that's played. But one thing, interestingly though enough, is that traditionally the NFL does not award Super Bowls to stadiums that are located in climates with an expected daily temperature less than 50 degrees on game day, unless the field can be completely covered with a retractable roof. And I guess the reason was so many people can actually enjoy the game and not have to worry about the weather. Of course, the designated home team alternates between the NFC team in odd number games and the AFC team in even number games. So since this year's Super Bowl is Super Bowl 60, it would be even, of course. So it is definitely a home. But the region that's hosted the most Super Bowls, by the way, is the Miami metro area and New Orleans, tied for first. They both hosted it 11 times during all of it. Then Los Angeles is next with 8. They'll host the next year's Super Bowl to make it 9. But after those top 3, it's Tampa at 4th with 5 appearances of the Super Bowl. And then 5th is Phoenix with 4. So Pretty crazy stuff, of course. And finally, there is a number of now this year's venue will be taking place at Santa Clara's Levi Stadium, of course, in the San Francisco area. Levi Stadium is going to be where the game is hosted, and it's currently the home of the San Francisco 49ers, of course. Since 2014, they had to build it in Santa Clara due to the negotiation with San Francisco falling through, so they had to build it in Santa Clara. The stadium seats around 68,000 people, 68,500. It's hosted not only NFL Super Bowls, it's also going to host multiple matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. As well as WrestleMania, of course. People praised it for its excellent sightlines, beautiful architecture, tons of amenities, technological advancements, public transportation access. However, the stadium was criticized for its corporate atmosphere and lack of football atmosphere. Also, pilots flying in San Jose Airport have frequently been blinded by the lights from the scoreboards, due to the fact the stadium is directly in the flight path of the runways. So, pretty interesting stadium, of course, in Santa Clara. And that will cover a bit about the stadium and stuff. So that will be covering the stadium slides for this year's Super Bowl. So that will cover for a bit. We'll take a bit of a verbal break as we head on back outside, of course, to check out our plane. Beautiful sightlines here today. Bit of a cloudy day here in San Jose. So we're just 404 nautical miles out of San Jose, California, of course. So when we get ready for the Super Bowl, of course, we'll talk about the Seahawks in a little bit. So we'll get ready to get going pretty soon. So the Seattle Seahawks will be our first team we'll talk about in a bit. So my big question would be the NFL this year, of course. So this should be interesting, though. Who would probably be able to compete for the title next year? So would be interesting to see who would compete for the title this year. So definitely pretty interesting year, of course. So let's go ahead and talk about the first of the pretty important deal. And to talk about one of the more important things going on, of course, for me at least, is for next week. So after this week's Super Bowl matchup, and our next game day flight will be in Mexico, as we'll be preparing for our flight in Mexico. We'll be seeing Club America in Guadalajara in Mexico. That will be our next game day flight. Will be in Mexico. On February 13th, we'll be doing the big matchup between Chivas Guadalajara versus Club America. That will be our flight on Sunday. We'll cover the big matchup between two of Mexico's most celebrated historic football clubs in Mexico. It was tough because I could have picked Napoli and Roma or Inter Juve, but I ended up picking the Mexican club since I want to fly Mexico for a bit, and I thought, why not pick a different matchup? Just had some variety in this matchup. And then, of course, the week afterwards, the next one afterwards, on February 20th, is going to be the North London Derby, Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal, between two of London's biggest clubs, especially North London. And then the 27th, of course, February 27th, is going to be Rangers and Celtic. The Rangers and Celtic are going to be the big old firm. Should be a massive matchup in Scotland between these two Scottish football giants. So that'll be what you guys are going to be coming up in the next few weeks or so for the game day matchups. So I'm looking forward to covering the rivalry in Mexico. Should be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and talk about the Seattle Seahawks for a bit. Our NFC representative, the Seattle Seahawks, playing the NFC West. They play their games here. They play their games at Lumen Field since 2002, and the Seahawk is actually named after the osprey, a species of bird that's often referred to as a Seahawk. Now, they joined the NFL back in 1976 as an expansion team. However, they were actually assigned to the AFC from 1977 to 2001 before rejoining the NFC in 2002. And Seahawks fans, referred to as the 12th man, has set the Guinness World Record for the loudest crowd noises sport event twice during a span in the 2013 season, and the latter event also generated an earthquake on the Richter scale. As the only NFL team in the Pacific Northwest, the Seahawks attract a wide support from a wide geographical area from Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Utah, as well as the Canadian province of British Columbia. The Seahawks have won 12 division titles and 4 conference championships, and are the only team to have played both in the AFC and NFC championship games. Of course, their greatest era of success was the 2010s, led by Pete Carroll as their head coach in their historic Legion of Boom defense, achieving 5 straight 10-win seasons, appeared in back-to-back Super Bowls, and won their only Super Bowl title in Super Bowl 48. Absolutely annihilated the Denver Broncos. And they produced a lot of really talented players over the years. So, definitely some incredible talents and players that played for the Seattle Seahawks over the years. So, that picture's just been this past year, of course. This is their 50th anniversary this year for the Seahawks. They're about 50 years old. So, their team colors are College Navy, Action Green, and Wolf Gray. The owner is actually the Paul Allen estate. Paul Allen used to own this team, though there has been talk of potentially new ownership. But they've appeared in the Super Bowl quite a few times. Their first ever Super Bowl appearance was 2005. but they got absolutely destroyed by the Steelers at the time. So, in terms of logos and uniforms, of course, the Seattle Seahawks, they play at Lumen Field, which is one of the NFL's loudest venues. This multi-purpose stadium in Seattle is the home of the NFL Seahawks, but it's also the home of two of Seattle's proud Major League Soccer clubs, the MLS's Seattle Sounders and the National Women's Soccer League's Seattle Reign. Now, in terms of NFL games, it seats 68,000 people, while for the MLS, it could seat 37,000 for most MLS matches. And the stadium was built between 2000 and 2002 to replace the Kingdom, of course, which was aging really bad. So they needed a new venue, and it was known for its intimate atmosphere, of course. Now, of course, this place is extremely noisy, and the reason why it's so noisy, the seat decks of the partial roof both trap and amplify the noise in the stadium and reflect it back in the field. That's why this stadium is particularly infamous for causing lots of false start penalties, delay of games. It made it a very tough place to play in the NFL, of course. And that noise also, in fact, at one point, the world record for the noise was 137 decibels. Yes, at one point, the highest for Seattle Seahawks games was 137.6 decibels, which is extremely loud. So, pretty big stuff, of course. But it's also going to host games of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It's going to host matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It's hosted matches of the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup as well, so plenty of soccer experience in the NFL. So tons of experience over there, of course. For the logos for the Seattle Seahawks, when the Seahawks first debuted back in 1976, the team's logo was a stylized royal blue and forest green eagle or thunderhead. It was based on the old mask that was worn by the Awaka art mask. And the nickname Seahawks was a historical nickname for the osprey. Of course, when they debuted, their helmet and pants were silver, while the home jerseys were royal blue with white and green stripes, and the road jersey was white as well. And they wore this color scheme all the way from 1976 to 2002. When they changed their color and redesigned it to make it more modern, and they changed the colors to a lighter Seahawk blue, darker Seahawk navy, and the helmets were changed from silver to a lighter shade of blue. And they wore those uniforms from 2002 to 2011, and then they changed it when Nike came over and changed to what is now the current uniform for the Seahawks, with wolf gray, college navy, and action green became their colors. But they also had different uniform combinations, including alternate gray, and they now had 9 different uniforms as well, of course. One very interesting thing about the Seahawks, of course, they now brought back the throwbacks in 2025, which was used as an alternate uniform. So they had to retire the gray tops. So, pretty important stuff here for the Seahawks, of course. Very proud of their navy color. So, of course, the Seahawks have had several important rivalries during their time in the NFL, especially with their division. Of course, the Rams are a pretty big rival to Seattle, and that came into existence in 2002 when the Seahawks moved to the NFC West. Their first major matchup was the 2004 NFC wildcard, where the Rams defeated the Seahawks. And while much of the intensity declined as the Rams fell in the competition during the 2000s or 2010s, however, ever since the Rams returned back to LA, the competition has made this rivalry even more intense. And as a result, due to the dominance of the Rams during the 2020s, the Seahawks have recently viewed the Rams as their divisional arch rival. And as of 2025, the Seahawks led the series 30-28. But the Rams have won 2 of the 3 playoff meetings, of course. But the most recent meeting, of course, was the NFC Championship game, which Seattle won, obviously. Then they have the San Francisco 49ers from 2011 to 2014. The Seahawks and 49ers emerged as the 2 best teams in the NFC and developed a rivalry. And both teams even reached the playoffs quite a few times, including the NFC Championship game, which the Seahawks beat the 49ers in a controversial win, 23-17. And then the Seahawks went to win their next 10 matchups from 2014 to 2018. Of course, the 49ers won 6 straight after 2019. And of course, in 2025, the 2 teams met for the number 1 seed in the NFC, which Seattle won. And the most recent meeting, of course, was the divisional matchup, which Seattle absolutely destroyed the 49ers at home. And as of the 2025 season, the Seahawks led the series 33-24. The last major conference division rivalry, is the Arizona Cardinals, and they became division rivals again once Seattle moved to the West. However, recent years has become extremely bitter, especially during the mid and late 2010s, as both teams face off for NFC West supremacy. And the peak, of course, was during the Legion of Boom era Seahawks. And currently Seattle leads the series 31-22, but yet these 2 teams have still yet to meet in the playoffs. Now, some of their other rivalries include the Green Bay Packers, who developed some pretty intense matchups, but historically their big rival was the Denver Broncos, because prior to the realignment, the Broncos and the Seahawks played in the same division. So there were some pretty intense meetings between the 2, and they've even met in the Super Bowl in 2014, which, of course, the Seahawks absolutely annihilated them 43-8. So they definitely have had some very intense rivalries over the years for the Seattle Seahawks. In terms of their team culture, of course, the 12s, which used to be called the 12th man, but they changed it to just the 12s, were known for their legendary support for the Seahawks. And they were some of the loudest fans of the NFL. And they even set the world record for the loudest sporting event twice, 137.6 decibels. Prior to the game, of course, the Seahawks raised a giant 12 flag at the end of the stadium. Of course, as a tribute to their fans. Of course, they used to call themselves the 12th man, but with the whole conflict with the 12th man with Texas A&M, they just dropped their 12th man and referred to as the 12s. Their mascot, of course, is Blitz, who's the official mascot of the Seattle Seahawks. As well. So that's their official mascot, of course. Now, finally, for the Seahawks, of course, they had some iconic legendary players over the years. Many Hall of Famers and club stars have made their way to Seattle. But if I had to pick the most famous Seattle Seahawks player, of course, it would be wide receiver Steve Largent. If you guys aren't aware about Steve Largent, of course, he is the greatest Seattle Seahawk of all time and one of the NFL's greatest receivers. He was picked in the 4th round by the Oilers. However, the Oilers didn't keep him, and then he became a Seattle Seahawk. And as a result, And he, as a result, made the team unexpectedly, and he played for the rest of his 14 years in Seattle, compiling a 7-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, led the NFL in receiving yards twice, and of course, he's part of the NFL's 100th anniversary all-time team. And of course, he had over 13,000 yards, 100 touchdowns, and truly was the greatest Seattle Seahawk of all time. He's definitely the GOAT. Then, of course, you have Hall of Fame left tackle Walter Jones. Also played for his entire career in Seattle, all 12 seasons in Seattle. Racked up a very impressive career, one of the greatest left tackles of all time. He only just gave up 23 sacks total, and only penalized for holding 9 times in Seattle. 6-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler. He's part of the 100th anniversary all-time team, 2000s All-Decade team, and his number is probably retired in Seattle, of course. His number is 71. Then, of course, you have defensive tackle Cortez Kennedy, part of the 90s All-Decade team, very feared defensive tackle, 5-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler. He once won Defensive Player of the Year back in 1992, and racked up quite a career with 58 sacks out of the nose tackle, out of the defensive tackle position. Incredible career in Seattle, of course. Unfortunately, he passed away way too young at 48 years old due to heart failure. So, then of course we have one of the best modern players for the Seahawks, and I think a future Hall of Famer, Bobby Wagner, who's a multiple-time, he's a 9-time Pro Bowler with the Seattle Seahawks. But he's a future Hall of Famer, a 10-time Pro Bowler, 11-time All-Pro. He won a Super Bowl with them in Super Bowl 48. All part of the All-Decade team in the 2010s. Absolute menace. Bob Wagner is definitely one of the best Seattle Seahawks of all time. And he's going to make his way to Canton, Ohio once he retires. He'll make his way to Canton. Absolute menace of a linebacker, one of the leaders of the Legion of Boom. Then you have probably their greatest quarterback of all time, Russell Wilson, who's their greatest quarterback. Another potential Hall of Famer. 10-time Pro Bowler. An All-Pro in 2019. He once led the league in passing touchdowns and passing rating leaders. He even won a Rookie of the Year, too. Put up a really nice career, though. Russell Wilson, he was undersized. He was only 5'11". A lot of people didn't think highly of him when the Seahawks drafted him, of course. But he turned out to be an absolutely massive steal. And he has been extremely good ever since. Then, of course, after that, Marshawn Lynch, probably one of their most talented running backs. Sean Alexander's another great one, but Marshawn Lynch was especially huge for the Seahawks once he entered Seattle in 2010, and he hit his peak during his Seattle days. 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. He's part of the All-Decades team of the 2010s. Once led the league in rushing touchdowns twice, and was a big piece in their run in the 2010s for the Seattle Seahawks. And he became an absolute beloved player in Seattle. Then, of course, we have Richard Sherman, the feared safety leader. Good old Richard Sherman, drafted by the Seahawks in the 5th round. And he was absolutely unstoppable during his time in Seattle. 37 interceptions in his career. 5-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro. Part of the NFL's All-Decade team of the 2010s. And even won a Super Bowl. But Richard Sherman was an absolute nightmare for a lot of quarterbacks. And definitely a future Hall of Famer, potentially. Definitely a potential future Hall of Famer. Then you have Kenny Easley, who's also in the Hall of Fame. Part of the All-Decade team of the 80s. And he became one of the greatest defensive backs of his era. 32 interceptions, 5-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. He even won Defensive Player of the Year in 1984. Absolute menace of a defensive back. Absolute menace. And of course, you also have Steve Hutchinson as well. Another great guard. He's been Seahawks for 12 seasons in the NFL for the Seattle Seahawks, of course. But he played for many years in both Seattle and Minnesota, of course, during his time in the NFL. 7-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, part of the 2000s All-Decade team, and both the 50 greatest Viking and Seattle Seahawks. But he's a Hall of Famer, and he's definitely an icon for both teams. And of course, there are many more iconic Seahawks over the years. You got Sean Alexander as well. He was absolutely great during his time in Seattle. Unfortunately, injuries really hurt his career. Earl Thomas was a big one, of course. Earl Thomas was a big player during his years in Seattle. So definitely some really iconic players. So that concludes our slides on the Seattle Seahawks. We'll get to Seattle pretty shortly. We're about 224 nautical miles away from New England, of course. We're about to get right into San Jose, not too much longer. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll talk about our other team, the Patriots. So we definitely see some really nice scenery down below. So we're right now over Northern California. We're just above Trinity National Forest. We're about to enter into the San Francisco area very shortly. Mm-hmm. So we're getting pretty much closer here. We're not too much far away, of course. So what I'm going to do afterwards, of course, I got some achievements to work on. So in terms of Flight Sims content for the next week or so, Murphy will be back on Monday for the next part of the Landmark series. He'll be doing Angkor Wat in the Beach C90 from Myanmar over to Bangkok, and then to Angkor Wat. So that would be pretty fun, though. Southeast Asia, of course, pretty underrated region. So he'll be back there on Monday. Should be pretty exciting, of course. Looking forward to that one, of course. Allison Johnson's going to be back on Saturday, of course, so we got the streaming stuff. So looking forward to that. So we'll get here pretty soon, of course. So let's go ahead and talk about our last team, of course, the New England Patriots. So let's go ahead and briefly talk about them as we make our way down over to was, of course, the New England Patriots. Now, they play in the greater Boston area, of course, as part of the AFC East, but they don't play their games in Boston. They actually play in a town 22 miles southwest of Boston in Foxborough at Gillette Stadium. As of 2024, they're actually the second most valuable sports team in the world. Yes, they're the second most valuable, which is crazy. In fact, according to 2023, in the current rankings, they are worth $9 billion US. $9 billion, which is actually insane to think about it. To put this in perspective, of course, the most valuable sports team is the Dallas Cowboys at number 1 with $10 billion. The most valuable team that's not even in the United States is Real Madrid at $6 billion, $6.6 billion, which means the Patriots are about nearly $3 billion more valuable than Real Madrid, the biggest soccer club in the world. So there you go. Deal with it. They were founded back in 1959 as the Boston Patriots. They were a charter member of the AFL before joining the NFL in 1970, and they played for various games throughout Boston and Fenway Park until they moved to Foxborough in 1971. Of course, the team was generally mediocre for its first 4 decades, with the exception of Super Bowl appearances in 1985 and 1996. However, they achieved unexpected success in the 2001 season under head coach Bill Belichick and quarterback Tom Brady, which would begin the 19-year dominance of the Brady-Belichick era, one of the greatest dynasties in sports, in which the Patriots would claim every major Super Bowl record. Right now, the Patriots have hold the record for the most Super Bowl wins with 6, tied with the Steelers, of course. The Patriots have now had unprecedented dominance. Of course, their colors are mainly red, white, and blue, but also New Century Silver is their team colors. And their mascot is Pat Patriot. He's their proud mascot, of course. But yes, the New England Patriots, long history, of course. In terms of the logos and uniforms, the Patriots logos and uniforms, their original logo was a simple tricorn hat that was only used in tricorn hats that was used in 1960. However, from 1961 to 1992, the Patriots used a logo of a Revolutionary War Minuteman hiking a football. And the Minuteman logo became known as Pat Patriot logo, which later became the mascot, Pat Patriot. Of course, the Patriots have changed their logo back in 1993 to reveal a great face of a Minuteman wearing red, white, and royal blue. That begins as a tricorn and transitions into a flowing banner-like design, becoming known as the Flying Elvis, due to the fact it resembles a young Elvis Presley, as well as a new logo. And that logo has been used for the Patriots ever since. In terms of uniform, of course, the Patriots' uniform has always, for much of its early years, were mainly red, white, and blue. However, then they changed their look with their new logo in the 90s. And then they changed their many uniforms into 2010s with a darker shade of blue and silver. And they wore that look until 2019, and they changed their uniform, making their all-blue color rush uniform their main uniform, complete with a tweaked nameplate front and numbers, of course. And that is kind of their uniforms, pretty similar, of course. So that's kind of how the Patriots wore their uniforms, of course, over the years. They play their games, of course, at Gillette Stadium, the home of the Patriots ever since 2002. It's also the home of the MLS's New England Revolution. And it replaced the old Foxborough Stadium that used to be there. Its seating capacity is 64,000, which includes 5,800 club seats and 82 luxury suites. This new stadium, of course, is served by special commuter rails from Boston and Providence during sporting events. And the Patriots have sold out every home game since moving into the new stadium. And this stadium now is going to host several matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And it will be known during the events as Boston Stadium. So yes, it can actually host soccer games here too. But it's the home of the Patriots, of course. A very unique thing, of course, is Patriot Place, which is an open-air shopping center near the stadium, of course. And it's hosted many other events. It's hosted concerts. It's hosted lacrosse concerts. Ice hockey's hosted here, and more. I've hosted here at Gillette Stadium. So, pretty important stuff here for the Patriots, of course. Beautiful Gillette Stadium. Okay, we just reached top of descent. Top of descent's coming up here very soon. So we now just reached top of descent. So here it is, guys. We're about to reach top of descent here. We finally make our way down. So the Patriots have had several rivalries within the AFC East, mainly with the Bills, Dolphins, and Jets. The Jets have been around since 1960, and they play each other at least twice a year. And games of these two teams often play out like the fierce Red Sox-Yankees rivalry baseball, which we will definitely cover one of these rivalries when we get to baseball, of course. Given the geographic rivalry with New York City and Boston. And of course, they also have rivalries with the Buffalo Bills. And these two are actually two of the most successful teams of the AFC East, as they combine for 17 AFL or AFC championships, the most of any two teams in the AFC East. And the Miami Dolphins have also met plenty of times. Especially, and currently the Dolphins lead the rivalry with the New England Patriots. But the Patriots have also had other rivalries, most notably outside their division. The most notable rival outside their division is the Colts. Because the Colts and Patriots used to play in the same division, actually. But it was especially grown the most during the 2000s because of not only the numerous win seasons for both teams, but two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time so happen to play against each other all the time. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, of course. And considered to be the greatest individual NFL rivalry of all time, with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Some absolute classics, of course. And as a kid growing up, I got to know that rivalry pretty well. Of course, for the Patriots, they have a unique team culture. Of course, their mascot is Pat Patriot. He is their team mascot, of course. A Revolutionary Minutemen wear a Patriots home jersey based on the original logo. Now, one very interesting tradition here, of course, you see the picture. The Patriots also employ a corps known as the Enzo Militia. And believe it or not, they're actually a group of American Revolutionary War reenactors Founded by Jeff Campbell, a reenactor for the 9th Massachusetts Regiment. And he founded this as well. And they consist of around 30 men and women who dress 20 for each home game. And whenever the Patriots score, whether it be a touchdown, field goal, point after touchdown, or a safety, the militia behind the opposite end zone will fire volley blanks of muskets. So they actually fire blanks, which is really cool. It's a really cool tradition for the Patriots. And they said at one point the amount of load they used for Black Power was more than a regular one does, so they could be heard throughout the stadium. And of course, the Patriots draw much of their fan base in the New England region of the United States, as well as the Canadian province of Quebec, and much of Atlantic Canada supports the Patriots. And our last slide for today, of course, our final slide, will be covering the most notable players of the New England Patriots. Of course, you guys probably, if you guys know anything about the NFL or even American football, you probably know the number one player for the New England Patriots is. It's Tom Brady. You would be an idiot to not suggest that Brady is not the greatest New England Patriot of all time. I mean, the accolades kind of speak for itself, because let's look at Tom Brady. 7-time Super Bowl champion, the most of any player ever. 5-time Super Bowl MVP, a 3-time MVP, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, 6-time All-Pro, a record 15 Pro Bowls, led the NFL in passing touchdowns 5 times, 4-time passing yards leader. He's part of both the 2000s and 2010s All-Decades team, 100th anniversary all-time team, and he's won multiple Sportsman of the Year as well. And of course, his number 12 is also proudly retired. And he set so many NFL records, including quarterback wins with 251 wins, 89,000 passing yards, 649 touchdowns in his career. All those are NFL records. I mean, not bad for a quarterback that was drafted in the 6th round with the 199th overall pick. Yes, a 6th round quarterback put those kind of achievements. But Tom Brady's an absolute legend of the game, and rightfully the greatest quarterback of all time. Duh. Outside of that, though, we have the 2nd greatest Patriot of all time, John Hannah. John Hannah is also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Of course, we're waiting for Brady to make his appearance, but John Hannah is the 2nd greatest Patriot. One of the greatest offensive linemen, played all 13 seasons with the Patriots, compounded an impressive 10-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, part of multiple All-Decades and Anniversary all-time teams. And of course, he probably retired the number 73 as well. He's been extremely impressive offensive lineman, an absolute menace of an offensive guard. But John Hannah definitely is the 2nd greatest Patriot of all time. And hey, being the 2nd greatest Patriot is a pretty high honor. Then, of course, your next Patriot, of course, is going to be Rob Gronkowski, who's going to make it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame next year. Good old Gronkowski. Let me just say, Rob Gronkowski is basically an absolute nightmare for your defensive players. He came to the NFL out of Arizona, of course, with the 2nd round, and he will go on to win 4 Super Bowls during his time in New England, 4-time Super Bowl champion. He was a 4-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. He once led the receiving touchdowns in 2011, and he's part of the 2010s All-Decade team and 100th anniversary all-time team. Gronk truly was one of the most complete tight ends in NFL history. And Gronk is definitely going to make it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. In fact, speaking of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he'll be eligible for 2027. and he's probably going to make the Hall of Fame next year because he's got one of the most impressive players to make it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he will definitely make it. Gronk is definitely making it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then you have Mike Hayes, another member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a feared corner during the 70s and 80s for the Patriots. He's an 8-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, part of the 80s All-Decade team, and both the 75th anniversary and 100th anniversary all-time teams, and one of the greatest New England Patriots of all time. Absolute menace of the defensive back. 46 interceptions. Absolute menace of a guy. Then you have Ty Law, who was a big defensive cornerstone for the Patriots' early dynasty years. And he came out of Michigan and became an absolute menace. 2-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, part of the 2000s All-Decades team, 3-time Super Bowl champion. Ty Law combined career 53 interceptions. Ty Law, absolutely incredible player over his time in New England. Richard Seymour, the feared defensive end. Richard Seymour, another great star that helped the Patriots win multiple Super Bowls. A 5-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, part of the All-Decade team at the 2000s, and he became an absolutely menacing defensive end. So Richard Seymour was a major piece for their success. Andre Tippett, of course, major linebacker for the Patriots during the 80s. He became an absolute mess with being a 4-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, 1980s All-Decade team. He even won Co-Defensive Player of the Year in 1985. One of the greatest and most feared pass rushing linebackers of his era. Then, of course, the next one on the list is actually the most recent Patriots Hall of Famer. Adam Vinatieri's actually made it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Probably one of the greatest kickers of all time. Adam Vinatieri's finally making it to the Hall of Fame. He's won 4 Super Bowls during his time in the league. 3 with the Patriots, 1 with the Colts. 3-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler, part of the NFL's 2000s All-Decade team, and the 100th anniversary team. And he's set many NFL records as a kicker, including most career points scored, most career field goals made and attempted, and most combined regular season and postseason games played. Vinatieri, long history in the NFL, and good to see him finally get to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, of course. Then the other notable players, Randy Moss was a big part of the 2010s. He was part of the big team in 2007, but he was absolutely insane during his time as the Patriots. Then, of course, their current quarterback, Drake May. He took the Patriots into the Super Bowl in his second season. Drake May, absolutely incredible year, of course. Drake May is going to be... He's already gotten to 2 Pro Bowls, of course, but this year he's had an unbelievable second year in New England. So, no question, Drake May's had an incredible start his career, and there are many more legendary Patriots. But these are just the New England Patriots I would choose, though, if I were to be in charge, of course. So we're gonna make our way over to San Jose. We're just above San Francisco right now. There's San Francisco International Airport, and yes, it looks like the fog's out this morning. Of course, this area is notorious for fog. And yeah, San Francisco is dense fog. So here we go, guys. We're about to make our way down over to San Jose. So we're going to be arriving to San Jose International Airport. So, so San Jose International Airport is actually the second busiest airport in the Bay Area, behind San Francisco International. This dates back to 1939. This past year served 10.6 million passengers, which is a bit of a drop compared to the peak of 2019. Of course, which is kind of weird because San Jose is actually the bigger of the two cities in the Bay Area. But one interesting thing about San Jose International Airport is it's mainly flown by Southwest Airlines, but also Alaska Airlines has some flights in San Jose. It's a pretty neat little airport, of course. San Jose kind of overlooked compared to a lot of the airports in the Bay Area, but it should be a nice area to land, of course. So we'll turn on our landing lights as we approach down to San Jose International. Hey, Sam, good to see you. Yes, there is a Super Bowl today. The Seahawks and Patriots are playing today. Yep, the Super Bowl's finally coming on, of course. Big game here in big matchup, of course. Should be an absolute crazy game tonight with the Seahawks and Patriots. I picked Seattle to win. I don't want to see the Patriots win another championship. I've already had enough trauma seeing Brady win all those Super Bowls as a Colts fan. I've already had enough trauma doing that. I do not want to see the Patriots win another championship. I've already had enough trauma with that. But yes, there is a Super Bowl today. Super Bowl 60. So let's see, did that. 39 knots. I'm going to go ahead and put the auto brake down. But yes, we got the big game though. In Levi Stadium, which is why we're flying to San Jose today. That's why we decided to fly from Seattle to San Jose, since it would be reasonable enough for the time I'm streaming. So I'm going to go ahead and slow down. So yeah, we're doing the RNAV-Z approach into San Jose, since it worked better with the approach, with the arrival. So we're going to approach here very soon. Bad Bunny is going to be doing the halftime approach. Is Bad Bunny. He's the Puerto Rican rapper and singer. He will be performing the Super Bowl. He's very popular in the Spanish, in the Latin community. Very big. He's already got 6 Grammy Awards, 17 Latin Grammys, 8 Billboard Music Awards and such. He's going to be the Super Bowl halftime performer. So he'll be doing the, so it should be interesting to see how he performs. I'm not like most people. I'll give him a chance. I hope he does all right. Like the music he does is not my type of music. I'm more of a metalhead, but I'll be more willing to give him a chance to see how well he performs. I know I've seen some bad Super Bowl performances before, so I just want to wait and see how it turns out. So, should be interesting to see how things turn out, of course. So we're going to go ahead. So we're going to go ahead and set the thing. So we're about to arrive into downtown San Jose. So here we go. We're going to turn left. And turn on the glide path. Since it is kind of foggy, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the little I'll turn on the little display thing, heads-up display, so it'll make it a little easier to make the landing through the fog. It's on a glide path, so we're going to go ahead and do the glide path at 139 knots. And we'll make our landing soon. So, our And we're going to go ahead and deploy the landing gear. Landing gear deployed. So we should be doing... But yeah, I was not expecting the Super Bowl this year, though, San. This was not a Super Bowl that anyone would have predicted in the beginning of the season. I mean, most of us predicted Chiefs and Eagles for the Super Bowl. Crazy to see how that turned out, considering the Chiefs didn't even make the playoffs. Yes, we finally can see a season where Patrick Mahomes did make the playoffs. So the only bad thing it had to be the Patriots to win. If it wasn't Mahomes, it was going to be the Patriots. Here it is, guys. This is downtown San Jose coming up in front of us through the fog. So there's the Sharks Arena, home of the San Jose Sharks, the city's main sports team, of course, the San Jose Sharks. Who are doing okay, 27-24 in the NHL. The Sharks are doing all right. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the autopilot. Don't really need that when we need to land. And we officially have made it to San Jose, California. Okay, I can put this up. And we officially made it to San Jose International Airport. There's the brakes. Gonna lay off the... And we're finally turning off. And we can officially park in the parking lot. Our landing rate, by the way, negative 203, which is really good. Negative 203 FPM. Really good landing rate. Very smooth. So, park officially right here. There we go. And that's it, everyone. Welcome to San Jose, California. We made it just in time for the Super Bowl, of course. We officially made it. So, guys, thank you all so much. I hope you guys had a great Super Bowl Sunday coming up. Should be a lot of fun for the big game, of course. Hoping Seattle wins. I'm tired of seeing the Patriots win the championship. I don't want to see them. So take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. We're going to say hello to my good friend, Boozy Sheep. So we'll be saying hello to him. Stick around for the raid. Take care, everyone, and have a great Sunday, everyone. And enjoy the Super Bowl. Goodbye, everyone. and see you all soon. Take care, everyone.